One of the things I pride myself on doing is attempting to be neutral with both parties, and I oftentimes, for that reason, state that I believe the Democrats and Republicans are, for a majority of their members, identical in their positions. Um, whether it's the warmongering or austerity, it is what it is. But a lot of times there are little small kind of incremental ways that they show themselves to have some variables. Um, so, for example, I have never seen a single Democrat, whether it's a member of the House, member of the Senate, a president, whoever the hell, in the last 40 years, talk about getting rid of the education department. And for that reason, I assign that kind of ideology of, oh, we have to get rid of this department, we have to get rid of this department, with being, tied specifically to that party. Now, there could always be some Democrat somewhere that feels the way. I haven't seen it out of the elected officials. I have not viewed it. But I found an interesting article by the Chicago Tribune. It's called Why Republicans Have Long Wanted to Shut the Education Department, or just shut education department. And it was written by Valeric Strauss, or Strauss, however you pronounce the last name. On April 4th, 2016, Fox host Sean Hannity asked Donald Trump if he would eliminate any federal department if he were to become president. Trump responded by saying that the Department of Education is massive and it can be largely eliminated. Actually, it is the smallest cabinet level department in terms of employees, but Republicans have opposed it ever since it began operations in 1980. It was created during the administration of President Jimmy Carter, who wanted the nation to pay more attention to education. What an evil man! Trump picked an education secretary, Betsy DeVos, or as Trump likes to call her in secret meetings, according to Omarosa, Ditzy DeVos, and he's not wrong for calling her that, who has repeatedly expressed opposition to the existence of the department she heads. Now, in a government reorganization expected to be announced Thursday, the Trump administration will propose merging the education and labor departments, reflecting the president's push to shrink the federal government, as well as the Republican view that the education policy should be left to the states. The proposal would underscore the belief held by Trump and DeVos that the first purpose of education is to create skilled workers for America's workforce, and we're going to do that by gutting the department that oversees that. Trump-DeVos theory of education contrasts with other purposes of education propounded by educators and philosophers, including the notion that public education is meant to help young people develop into active citizens who can participate and contribute to the democratic process in American society. In another view, philosopher and education reformer John Dewey once wrote, "The education process has no end beyond itself. It is its own end." Yeah, we're kind of getting a little bit of the mumbo jumbo with these words, but the education department was created in an effort to alleviate the subject to cabinet level status, to elevate the subject rather to cabinet level status, consolidate programs that were scattered in different agencies, save money, and make federal education programs more accountable. Republicans instantly opposed it, arguing against the expansion of the executive branch and saying education policy is the prevalence of states and communities. Carter didn't argue at that point, but he wrote this in the statement issued when he signed the 1979 legislation creating the department. If I would do my Carter impression, the time has passed when the federal government can afford to give second level part-time attention to its responsibilities in American education. If our nation is to meet the greatest challenge of the 1980s, we need a full-time commitment to education at every level of government, federal, state, and local. Not long after the agency was created, President Ronald Reagan said he wanted to eliminate it, but he never did. His education secretary, William Bennett, wanted to get rid of it too, but didn't. It's just so weird. Hey, let's gut the department I'm in head of. Let's get rid of my job. What a great idea. Other Republicans aimed to do the same thing. In 1995, notice they don't say anything about Bush 41. Wow. No wonder I like him more than whatever. We'll get into that later. In 1995, then Representative Steve Gunderson, Republican of Wisconsin, introduced legislation to merge education and labor. saying it would save billions of dollars. Hold on a second. Hello? Can I call you back? I'm in the middle of something. Can I call you back? I'm in the middle of something. I know, but I'm doing something. Hold on. All right. Yes. All right. Sorry about that. One person who showed up. I'm very apologetic. That'll never happen again. Anyways, this proposal was to merge the education and labor departments under Gunderson, and the department would have one secretary, one deputy secretary, three assistant secretaries, and it said that one assistant secretary for workforce preparation and policy would oversee an office of basic education, an office of higher education, and an office of workforce training, and lifelong learning. Two other assistant secretaries would be responsible for civil rights and workplace policy issues. That didn't happen either. It isn't likely that Trump's proposal will get through Congress. Democrats are expected to oppose it, and it is likely that some Republicans won't go along with it either. But the proposal is another reminder of Trump's determination to upend the U.S. government and recast public education into a process more closely aligned with perceived economic needs. I like that article. But let's go back to the part where they were talking about the various portions of this that I thought were really interesting, because the department exists, as Carter explained in his statement, so that you can have the highest possible level of attention. It's kind of like if I said, let's make a department of, I don't know, the environment, which is basically what the EPA is. The EPA exists for the purpose of elevating the attention. The federal government pays attention. I know that was a little bit of a tongue twister, to the environment, whether that's climate change, global warming, anything you can think of that has to do with the environment. So with the education department, it's a consolidated effort to say, hey, look, we don't, when we say, oh, California, my state, or Wisconsin, or wherever the hell can determine their own thing, we effectively ignore it for the sake of casting it off to the state government. Whereas it's something that we should prioritize, i.e., by having it as a top level cabinet position, because it's something that is important. So, his thing was never about making it to where the states couldn't decide anything. It was about the federal government symbolically and with the department purposefully acknowledging the importance of this particular part of American life. But let's go to the bill that Massey, Representative Thomas Massey from Kentucky, who I've mentioned a couple of times before, is one of the few Republicans in office I actually like, primarily because he's really principled when it comes to foreign issues. Like if we have a war and all the Republicans vote for it because they want to impress Trump, he'll be the only one who doesn't vote for it, or one of the few. So he is someone who does have principles, but his statement here is a little. I'm not a fan of this. So he put this bill out the exact same day that I believe DeVos was confirmed as education secretary, and he said rather, neither Congress nor the president through his appointees has the constitutional authority to dictate how and what our children must learn. Think how stupid that is. This liberty crap is really going to be the death of the U.S. Who the hell said anything about dictating what must be? Now, there is a curriculum, a standard, blah, 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 blah. But ask yourself, are you going to get rid of a curriculum and or a standards if the states decide what those are? It doesn't look like it. So, it's more of that. It reminds me of Rand referring to Paul, the senator, on the vaccine thing. Now, here's a guy who openly admits it's more beneficial to vaccinate your children so they don't go and infect anyone else around them, saying, oh, but we should have incentives to where people don't feel as if the government is forcing them to do something they don't want to do. It's like, well, dude, in some instances, you have to intervene and say, look, you have a disease that is detrimental to the health of the people around you. We're going to have to get involved so you don't go around infecting people. I mean, think about it. If let's say there was let's do a little bit of a hypothetical here to challenge this kind of theory about vaccines and the government forcing people to do it being such a horrible thing. If I had a disease that was curable, right, via injecting something in me that stops it, and the disease is basically to where anyone who comes in contact with me can be infected, which is what that outbreak was all about. And I say, oh no, I'm fully aware that I can go and get myself cured, or at least stabilized so I don't infect the people around me. But I don't want the government to make that decision for me. I want to go around and infect people. Wouldn't you think I'm a douchebag that doesn't care about the hells of the people around me? Just saying. But whatever. That's me making my sense, and people don't listen. So it's all good. So Massey continued, unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. should not be in charge of our children's intellectual and moral development. Listen to that. Unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. should not be in charge of our children's intellectual and moral development. You know who the education secretary is appointed by? The president of the United States. And you know how the president of the United States gets in office? He's elected. Or she, if that we get a female one eventually. My point is, he's basically saying screw the person who is picked by the person who the people pick, making decisions having to do with their department. Decisions that if the president doesn't like, he can easily flip back or get rid of them over. Again, the elected person can do things to influence, but whatever. So poking holes in that statement already. States and local communities are best positioned to shape curricula and meet the needs of their students. Wait a second. If states and local communities are doing that, and these states and these local communities are not the parents of the children, wouldn't they be dictating how other people's kids learn? You can't have it both ways. You can't tell me the federal government is trying to make what my kids learn, but then the states wouldn't be doing the exact same thing if given the power to do it. Schools should be accountable. Parents have the right to choose the most appropriate educational opportunity for their children, including homeschool, public school, or private school. And see, that's how, again, how stupid these statements are. When in just out of all these different presidents, right, out of all the years of the education department being around, all the secretaries, when the hell have any of them said, your child must go to public school? Your child must go to private school. Your child must go to whatever the hell school. We actually do have Republicans who have, tried to push for private school because they're trying to get rid of any. We went over this before, but that idea of trying to force people to go to one particular type of schooling has another thing that usually is in line with Republicans, because they mask themselves in the religious stuff and they say, oh, this private school is so great, you need to go to public schools. Blah. So they already continue showing themselves to not be particularly friendly with any public institution. For years, I have advocated returning education policy to where it belongs, the state and local level, said Representative Walter Jones. May he rest in peace, an original co-sponsor. That's, again, another person who was really good on foreign issues, but domestic stuff was just, I'm good. I mean, it was, oh my God. So we read enough of this statement from Massey. Let's talk a little bit about Jones. DC bureaucrats cannot begin, they love that word, cannot begin to understand the needs of schools and its students on an individual basis. Well, again, may he rest in peace, but if Republicans understood the needs of students on an individual basis, they might maybe, I don't know, work to reduce the cost of any of these schools, maybe push for free college, just, because they're trying to look at the individual concerns of students on an individual basis, not in general, and whatever, just more hypocrisy that keeps going on. But I think we've established this, what I was trying to say. So you got to ask yourself, right? Because my point when I bring up how long the education department's been around, for 40 years almost, I say that because it seems like there's a thing with Republicans where, unless it's beaten over their head, and I don't mean physically, I'm talking about, via losing elections over and over the particular topic, they can't let something that's new and that's actually wanted go. So, for example, Republicans used to be against Social Security, and then they kept getting smashed by FDR, and they suddenly ran a presidential candidate, Dwight Eisenhower, who was in favor of a lot of the social programs that Roosevelt introduced. What I'm wondering, and you see this with Obamacare all the time. Here's a law, right? This law was signed into law almost 10 years ago in 2010. Next year it'll be 10 years. And they still are talking about trying to get rid of it. It's a failure, blah 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 blah. And I'm like, dude, what decade is this law going to be around where you say, okay, we're going to stop messing with it? Because think about this. You're bombing 7 countries. You have a D+ rating in infrastructure. What other pressing issues do we have? 76% of Americans live in paycheck to paycheck. And you're introducing no jobs program. To Massey's credit, he has tried to address the wars a little bit. But you get my point. You have all of these really gaping issues. And the only thing you guys can talk about ever wanting to do or mess with is a department that's been around longer than any of these issues. Well, at least all the bombings or whatever of the different countries existed or started happening. So, this should tell you, hey, even if we don't necessarily like this, it's not really something I think is worth my time at this point. Maybe if I go and take out the actual gaping problems with America, we can seriously address these things. But Massey's another one of those politicians who, just like that's never happened before. Wow, something something's gone wrong. But like I was saying, he's another one of those people who, because they want to run for something else, is trying to curry favor with that base, and they're afraid to really buck the norms of their party. There exists no economic benefit to getting rid of this department any more than any of the other ones. But think about it. If he says, let's get rid of the Department of Defense, he gets accused of being someone who's weak on war. If he says, let's get rid of the Homeland Security Department, you're weak on on immigration. It's only when they talk about a social issue that they get away with just being evil. Enough with both sides. 5 people. Oh, I'm not saying they aren't, Corey, but my point is they go after this department like there's some kind of, it's like a fetish for them, because it's like no matter what decade it is, no matter what year it is, no matter how much time passes, they will just keep messing with this department, talking about getting rid of it. It's like, who the hell votes for abolition of the education department? And a lot of times I do feel like I'm kind of talking into an empty vacuum where I'll make a point and then the people around me don't really want to hear it or understand it. So, maybe that is kind of what's happening right here, but I'll close out soon. Let me just go and explain why this was relevant. Earlier today at 1 in the morning, wow, Massey retweeted a message by the YA Liberty, this Twitter account, and it said, which federal agencies would you abolish first? A, Internal Revenue Service, which is the IRS. B, Department of Education. C, Environmental Protection Agency. So I like 2 of those. I'm kind of whatever on the IRS, but it goes back to like what I was talking about, which is that a lot of times I give Republicans who, are anti-war credit, because it does take some level of personal integrity to not favor being involved in all these different conflicts. And I do think that that is something that should be appreciated. But it goes back to why I say that they're horrible more often than not on social issues. Because think about it, after 40 years, they're still trying to get rid of the education department. And they're talking about messing with the EPA, which was founded by a member of their own party, at a time when 97% of the world's scientists concluded that human activity affects the environment. So we're stuck with climate change deniers and people who are fear mongering about the federal government and blah 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 blah. Dude, anything to sell that individual liberty thing. Jesus Christ. I mean, sometimes I just watch them and I'm like, dude, you guys really think if you just gut this department, everything's magically going to improve? All the, like, if you want to have an education policy, have one that again has to do with making school more affordable. I haven't seen any of them talk about that on that party. Hell, to their credit, I haven't seen most of the Democrats talk about it, except for like 3 people, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of the members of the Senate. The House members would be a little bit harder to count because there's so many of them. My point is, it seems so often we're stuck with these people who want to get rid of everything while offering nothing of their own. What the hell is Massey's plan after getting rid of the education department? Oh, suddenly what, the states now can decide to each have their own individual ideas of what a student should learn? I do think that if Americans collectively are taught the same things, that's equality. I don't think I should be told about, I don't know, history of the U.S. for the entire time it's been around in California, and then history of the U.S. up until the Civil War in Alabama. My point is, it just feels like it's a really dangerous thing to have each state dictate the ways they want people to learn something. Because what if the governor and the legislators um, have a position that, I don't know, the people don't agree with? It's just like, I don't understand. And I guess you could, the argument against what I just said is that you theoretically could have the same problem arise from the education department doing it. But you already know most of these people who are talking all this individual liberty crap don't follow what the Voss is doing or what any of these, like a daily thing of just the education department. They don't pay attention to it. So it's not, basically, if it's not immigration, or whatever country that is being fear-mongered about, like right now it's Venezuela, last year was Iran, year before that it was North Korea. Very few of these, of just people in general, are going to pay attention to it. So there probably are a lot of people who do like the education department, think that it is stupid to say you care about something and then remove it from literally the highest position it could possibly have, which is a cabinet post. But they're not thinking about it regularly, and they're not going to vote based off of that. And the flip side to that coin is that a lot of times after they vote, they go, wait a second, I didn't want to get rid of that. I was never really in favor of doing away with that. It was just one of the things that came along with supporting this person who talked about individual liberty. The same person who, you know, tells you, oh, yes, we need to ignore the 97% of scientists who said climate change exists or is affected by human activity. You know, we need to pretend they don't exist because reasons, and we also need to abolish the EPA. Oh no, but I care about the environment. I really do. It's like, dude, you're talking to both sides of your mouth. You're saying get rid of the department that wants to, you know, pay attention to the environment, while also doing away or lambasting the position of an overwhelming majority of the world's scientists. And you want me to believe you actually care about this? And that's kind of my point. When I look at this individual liberty crap, and I see the fact that you have a group of people who are basically telling you, oh yes, if we just gut the education department and nothing else, suddenly we'll be able to afford more things, and now all of our students will be able to learn in a better way. And then they ask themselves, why don't most people believe this? Because we're not stupid. We know that the only reason you pick on this department is because Republicans don't care about education. Neither do libertarians. Why the hell do you think that all these different libertarians that get in office, Republicans, whatever the hell, you never see one of them talking about curbing the cost of going to school, making, again, whatever, if you don't want free college, fine, but curbing the cost because it's gotten over $1 trillion. You never see them talk about. All you do is see them crap on anyone that addresses the problem, and then never introduce anything themselves. And again, they talk about you're reaching or you're trying to attempt to smear. It's like, no, you have no plan of your own. You don't get to smear, especially as an elected official. I expect people online to just go and write stupid things and, you know, never have to face the consequence of their position. What I don't expect is for someone who sits in office for Massey's been in office for what, 5-6 years, and not introduce their own way of addressing education beyond let's get rid of what was already there. And I'm supposed to believe that's a person to take seriously on this topic. I mean, like, they don't get it. They just, again, he's doing this to appeal to his base, and stupid people on the computer are going to go along with this. And you don't have to be a die-hard supporter of someone to recognize where they've said something that you don't agree with. I consider myself a big supporter of Sanders, but I'll openly, express my contempt for his position on BDS, because I think that the best way to combat Israel, at least again, its government, not its people, because everyone that talks about Israel gets smeared as anti-Semitic. The best way to combat Israel is to basically hit it where it hurts, which is its government and its economic policies, which is to have businesses, especially the ones you have control over as an individual, not want to do business with them. Um, so that's something me and him disagree on, vehemently. But I'm not ashamed to state that, and I recognize that there are people who support him who will basically try to make excuses for it. And there was a person who tried to do that. They said, "Oh, well, he is Jewish." So I was like, no, no, no. That's my point. That if anyone's going to lead the movement of BDS and doing something about that horrible right-wing government in that country, it's going to have to be Jews from all over the world, because anyone else, including myself, gets smeared as anti-Semitic. We're talking about a crappy government that a lot of the people over there hate too. So you really can't win. But going back to what I was saying, with the education department, most people do not actively pay attention to that department. Most people do not think about it. And that's why Trump abandoned wanting to do much of anything to it, because he recognized, I don't need to pay attention to this. I can just talk about the wall and, maybe occasionally mention a war or two that I possibly want to end, or maybe scale down troops, and then people will support me and keep voting for me. So, no one really in that party hates education. They just couldn't care less about it, because they know that when they start talking about it, their voting base does not care. And that's ultimately a really big problem with this individual liberty crap and all those worthless platitudes. They try to tell you how much they care about the common man and your right to do things, while continuing to support a policy that has caused people who do squeeze through getting out of college by graduating to come out with uh, thousands of dollars in debt and not be able to spend or buy anything, basically with this big shackle on your leg. And then the people who are in office that can actually direct change, because they have a little dumb R next to their name, don't do anything. And they get away with it too, because the people who vote for them don't care about the topic either. And that's kind of my point. When I watched the comment section, right, there was one person who said, "Oh, I support this, and I'm also a teacher myself." I was like, yeah, but that's not really that surprising, because there's always an exception to the rule. I can imagine that most teachers would not want to get rid of the education department, especially when I saw so many of them protest DeVos getting named the head of it when she's never even, whatever. We can talk about her inexperience later on. My point is that it's not hard to picture where someone would have a problem with that person being in that position. And ultimately, when you see the individual liberty crap, and you're looking at the fact that these people are literally getting away with not coming up with any policy of their own, just so they can satisfy a group of people who are so stupid as to believe that if you just get rid of this department, everyone's now going to be much smarter, and we won't have to address the student loan debt crisis, because that's not really that big of a deal. I've never seen him talk about that. I've never seen him face flack for it either, because he doesn't care, and neither do any of these Republicans or libertarians. The closest you can get them to care about education is when they're smearing Sanders for wanting it to be free, while not having anything of their own to offer. So that about does it for the stream. I thank you for the 3 people that showed up. It's problematic that we live in a country where the people who are in office can see gaping issues, or at least be in office during that time period, and not really say much of anything about it year after year, and then have these individuals online that blindly support them. And I oftentimes state before, I have no preference for one party or the other, but I've never seen Democrats show the same open level of contempt toward education that Republicans do. And that department, as Carter stated when he signed it in the law, was designed to say, listen, I recognize education being something that people think individually they should pick how it goes. But we're putting this as a cabinet level position because we recognize its importance, and we want to show that the federal government sees this as a national priority. You know, that national emergency those Republicans were crying about because 12 of their senators voted to stop it because they didn't want to have Emperor Trump. This is another national emergency, the student loan debt crisis. And you won't hear a single one of these libertarian or Republican pricks talk about fixing that. And that's the problem with the U.S. That's why it's going to hell. So thank you.